colleges.
Thank you. Am I on? Let's see. I need to get my. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to share information regarding our association and the member colleges. My name is, oops, it's already moving forward. My name is Jenna Colvin, and I'm the president of the Georgia Independent College Association. GICA is a voluntary association of 24 private colleges in Georgia. Each campus has its own board of trustees and operates according to its own unique mission. So unlike USG or TCSG, we have no governing authority over the colleges. And instead, to be included in our membership, the colleges must be based in Georgia, operate as a nonprofit, and be accredited by SACS COC, arguably the gold standard in regional accreditors. Next slide. As an association, collective action is at the heart of our work. We serve our members in 4 key areas. On the policy front, Jet Tony and I are down here at the Capitol almost every day, tracking on the student aid programs that benefit students attending private colleges. And we also monitor legislation affecting higher education and college students. We offer our colleges business efficiency programs called collaborative services. They can choose to participate in these programs, and they may offer them benefits of scale they couldn't access on their own. By way of example, we're getting ready to roll out a multiple employer retirement plan, or MEP, which will allow the colleges to consolidate their 403B plans or their retirement plans, resulting in cost savings, ease in service, and reduction in risk. We anticipate $80 million going into that plan within the next few weeks. We also aggregate and package data, really hot button there, for our schools in the Georgia Awards database maintained by GOSA. They were here last week. And last year, we distributed nearly $600,000 in scholarships to the students attending our private colleges. And then we provide research and communication services to the colleges and to legislators. So if you have questions, feel free to call. My number is going to be on the last slide. On this map, you can see the names and locations of our colleges. The combined research expenditures for our colleges exceed $665 million. No doubt you're familiar with the 2 research institutions. Emory University is the highest ranked national university in Georgia. And when I visited their campuses, one of the unique features is that there's a hospital right in the middle of campus. Mercer University has been recognized as Princeton Review's best value among national universities. Our membership also includes several classic liberal arts colleges offering bachelor's and master's degrees. In this context, liberal arts does not reflect a political alliance, but rather emphasizes broad academics and individual personal growth. Through smaller classes, wide-ranging curriculum, and tight-knit communities, liberal arts colleges are designed to develop intellectually curious students into free thinkers who are versatile in the professional workforce. With Spelman, Morehouse, Clark Atlanta, we have 3 HBCUs in our membership. For the 15th consecutive year, Spelman has earned the distinction of being the #1 HBCU in the country. There are also 4 women's colleges in our membership. And for the last 5 years, Agnes Scott College has been recognized by U.S. News and World Reports as the #1 most innovative liberal arts college in the country. Many of our colleges were formed by religious organizations and continue to offer faith-based educational opportunities to their students. You'll see that collectively, our colleges enroll over 71,000 students, and just over 50,000 of those are undergraduates. Our colleges employ over 23,000 individuals in Georgia, and they spent more than $4.1 billion in wages and salaries last year. Importantly, our colleges invest in the students to the tune of $728 million annually in institutional grant aid. And while 1 in 7 students are enrolled in a GICA college, 1 in 5 degrees are awarded by GICA colleges. This role is so rewarding for me because I know the work we do directly impacts students in their educational journeys. That's amplified when you look at the demographics of the students our colleges serve. You can see from the pie chart on the left that over half of the students identify as a race other than white, and that 40% of our students are Pell Grant recipients. That's a shorthand way for saying they come from financially challenging circumstances. The pie charts on the right show that income levels for the students who've applied for financial aid with our colleges. More than 61% of those students come from families earning less than $75,000, and 46% of them come from families earning less than $48,000. Completing a college degree is an important path for lifting up these students and their families. The impact statements I've left on your desk show additional details about the popular colleges for your constituents and their majors. Last year, we awarded over 15,000 degrees, and from this slide, you can see that 43% of the bachelor's degrees were awarded in business, health professions, and biological or biomedical sciences. 77% of the master's degrees were awarded in health professions, business, or education, and 81% of the doctoral degrees were awarded in health professions, legal professions, that means more lawyers, and education. I wanted to take a minute to talk about the state aid programs that are available to students who attend private colleges. The tuition equalization grant, for the folks that are new on the committee, those are all administered by Georgia Student Finance, and so we are deeply appreciative for Lynn and her team for the work that they do for our students. The tuition equalization grant is awarded to all Georgia residents that choose to attend an eligible private college. When it was created in the early 1970s, this grant equaled 75% of the tuition and fees at UGA. Over time, we've lost that link to the UGA tuition and fees, and the current award amount is $900 per semester for 2 semesters. This remains an important tool in the financial aid packages that our schools put together for the students, and we are grateful for the $50 increase in the award amount last year. I saw that the House included it in the appropriations bill this morning, and so we appreciate that too. Students who earn Hope and Zell Miller can choose to attend GICA's colleges. Unlike the university system, where each college has its own amount that historically had a factor rate applied to it, students attending our colleges receive a fixed award amount. For the Hope Scholarship, that award amount is $2,282 per semester, and for the Zell Miller Scholarship, that award is $2,977 a semester. The Student Access Loan is an important loan of last resort program for over 1,500 students attending our colleges, and we are grateful to the chairman and the committee for including students attending private colleges in HB 1435 completion grants that were passed last year. Our colleges also serve over 26 REACH scholars. Chairman Dickey's not here today. And 15 of our colleges offer dual enrollment programs. All but 2 of those programs are located outside the metro Atlanta area, and this is an important resource for many rural Georgians. I wanted to take a minute to give you a fall enrollment update. This slide shows first-time undergraduate enrollment by degree institution. These are national numbers over time. I sort of wanted to have that up in the backdrop while I was talking about ours. If you ask any private college president, they will tell you that enrollment numbers are the lifeblood of their institution. It's the revenue side of the budget and operations. When private colleges don't meet their enrollment targets, they have to modify their budgets or raise money to fill the gap. There's not a state subsidy to carry them through the hard times. And so I'm happy to report that collectively we saw a 1.7% increase in full-time undergraduate enrollment in the fall of 2022 compared to their fall 2021 numbers. The colleges also experienced a 2.8% increase in part-time undergraduate enrollment and a 4.5% increase in part-time graduate enrollment. The only category where we saw a decrease was in full-time graduate enrollment, and there the decline was only 2.7%. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about public perception and college pricing. When I hear friends and neighbors talking about college prices, I have this the idea that they see the trend line going one way, up like a rocket ship. And so I wanted to share some data from the College Board report on trends in college pricing and student aid. You can see in this slide, which shows the 10-year percentage changes in inflation-adjusted published prices by decade from 1992 to 2023. Over those 3 decades, you can see that the periods of significant growth in tuition were from 1992 to 2012. Over the last decade, shown in orange on the chart above, or on the chart on the screen, you can see the trend line looks different for most sectors. And anecdotally, I can tell you that since I started in this job in the fall of 2020, 2 of our colleges have decreased their published tuition prices. This slide shows that for the 11th consecutive year, total educational borrowing in the United States has declined from its high point in 2010 and 2011. This slide shows the distribution of borrowers and debt by outstanding balance. You can see at the top a very few number hold a large percentage of the debt, and that 51% of the borrowers owe less than $20,000 in student loans. I wanted to take a few minutes to just talk about some challenges that we see for our sector and really for all sectors as it relates to enrollment. I've heard lots of people ask me about the demographic cliff and the number of 18-year-olds who are going to be showing up. That is a real problem. And also, you can see from this slide, it's a visualization of data from the SREB Higher Education Fact Book, that in this SREB region, which is mostly the Southeast, Georgia has the lowest home state college attendance rate. And on this slide, you can see that Georgia is the only state in the surrounding states with a net loss of students when looking at the migration patterns of students coming into and leaving the state for college. Finally, the chart on the right shows that first-time students in Georgia have a statistically significant higher rate of taking out loans than students in the surrounding states. In conclusion, I thank you for the opportunity to share information about the association, our colleges, our students, and our challenges. Our colleges want to be partners in solving the workforce challenge and creating a better educated Georgia. I'm happy to answer questions if time permits.
Thank you for the presentation. Number 24, Perkle, Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. On behalf of the absent Chairman Dickey, I would like to say that the REACH program, the REACH scholarship, is one of the best things that we do in the state of Georgia. Wow, there we go. That sounds a lot better, doesn't it? So on behalf of Chairman Dickey, well, and I didn't know my wife had your phone number, but absolutely, text it away. It is one of the absolute best programs, he would say, and I would agree with him. First-time college students, and I wasn't aware of this. So you have 14, I think you said.
26.
26 in the independent schools, and that is awesome. These are it's life-changing for those students. So next to the last, and part of it, I think I might have skipped through, and I think the chancellor had said something about that and I didn't listen close enough to his answer for what it was. And I'm sure he gave it to me.
You realize the chancellor is now in the room.
I'm looking. He's staring a hole through my forehead. That of all the great schools we have in the state of Georgia, how could it be possible that we have a net loss of students going elsewhere? And I'm sure he told me and I forgot, and maybe you could tell me and remind me, because we've got some of the best college and universities, private schools, public schools in the world, in the borders of this great state, and for the life of me, I can't understand how they could go.
In the interest of time, I'm going to let you off the hook and tell you that we will take that up. Anecdotally, I believe you have to realize that Georgia's had a net influx of migration into the state over the last decade for sure, and really the last several decades. And I believe, without scientific evidence, you're finding some students are going back where mom and dad may have gone to school. So if you moved in here from Louisiana after Katrina, you went back to LSU or you went back there. But I'm sure the chancellor. But so if you would take that under advisement, just in the interest of time, and let's tee that up for a meeting to talk about the net loss of students with that. Number one, is that Representative Bernal?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question goes in line with the other representative. So do you think that we lost students because Georgia would not give pass-fail grades during the COVID?
No, I don't think, that may have played a factor into it, but this is a long-standing number, year over year. It's not a one-time. The data is from 1 year, but if you look, this is a trend that's existed for a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Number 15, Representative Weiss.
Hello.
Chair and this illustrious group of educators and folks who are in this committee. I am gravely concerned as a former college and career director that we get to the bottom of this. Has there been any, bridge to high school counselors to assist us with making sure that our students know all the opportunities of getting funding in this state to stay in this state? And are there is there information that you would like to give to us to help us with more incentives for our children to stay in this state?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I won't speak for the other sectors, but I will say that I think we can definitely do better. We are very excited to see the money in the budget to fully fund the ratio for the school counselors. We know those are some busy folks in the K through 12 campus, and sometimes they're dealing with lots of things that don't involve college planning. So we're trying to figure out ways to help them do their job better with information from us too.
Thank you. Representative Jackson. And then,
This is very interesting. I appreciate all the information that you've given to us. But I have one question. Last year when we met, we talked about allowing students at Payne and Morris Brown to come on under the
TEG.
loans. Yes. And I know it passed through the House. I don't know what happened. If it's still in committee or what. What do we have to do to try and continue to help those two institutions? I noticed that they're growing tremendously, particularly Morris Brown, at a very fast pace. So are there any anything that is happening now to try and to get them on?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. They used to be members of our association, but no longer are. When they lost their SACS
Right.
accreditation, they were no longer eligible to be members. But I do know that a helpful step for them was returning to eligibility to award Title IV funds and to offer their students federal financial aid loans. And I think that they both are back in that status now. So that's, I think, helping with their growth.
thank you. Dr. Clark, Jasmine Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I do apologize for being a little tardy. I want to know if you were to compare Georgia to some of these other states that are not seeing a net loss, would you see things like needs-based scholarships for in-state students, or free tuition for the first 2 years for in-state students, or robust dual enrollment during the high school years that might be keeping those students in those states that right now Georgia might have something like that, but does not have the same financial opportunities to keep students in their state, so they are being pulled. If they're going to have to pay, why stay in a state when they can go anywhere they want to?
Thank you for the question. I have a chart that, so there's a me in every state, and we have surveyed our colleagues in other states and asked, because we get this question, right? Well, the TEG isn't that important because now we have hope, and do they have hope or not hope? So for the private colleges, we've not asked for public or for two-year institutions, but we have surveyed my counterparts in other states, because we all work on this, on student aid programs that benefit the students attending private colleges. And I will say in the Southeast that Georgia has the lowest combined award package for students attending private colleges. And I'm happy to share that chart offline if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, last question we have, number 13, former Secretary of the Committee, Patty Bentley. Representative Bentley.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to just give a comment to thank you for your work, your presentation, and thank you for introducing me to the private institutions. So I really appreciate all that you're doing. And also just to quickly acknowledge the question from Representative Jackson. That bill that you're referencing was House Bill 1515 that I worked on last year in the House, and it did pass the House, and it failed over in the Senate. So we do plan to reintroduce this year.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. That's all the questions we have. I'm sure we'll see you again during the session.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to change up the batting orders. I've communicated with President Riley. I know that Chancellor really want to make note that Chancellor Perdue has joined us, and recognize him at this time. If you'd join me in giving our Chancellor a hand, we're glad you have. We're doing that because we'll perhaps ask him to buy food and drink for the committee the next time he comes up. No, I'm just thank you, Mr. Chancellor, for being here. And as such, I think we're going to move on to the legislation. Is Representative Lim here? You're behind the pole there. We're going to bring you up there for House Bill 39. This, as previous members of the committee would know, we don't act on things when they're first sounding as a general rule, and we will not be taking action on this today, but we wanted to give the representative an opportunity to do that, also give the university system and technical college system an opportunity to speak to it and any others. So at this time, we had a sign-up sheet someplace out there. So if you wish to speak to House Bill 39, that would be a good time to do that. Just slip up and do that. And with that, I'm going to call up for hearing today House Bill 39 LC 500426. Representative.
Thank you, Chairman Martin and committee. I am grateful to be able to present House Bill 39 LC 500426. Excuse me, I'm a little sick, but not infectious, so I'll power through this. This bill, to me, is essentially a workforce bill. This bill would ensure that students whose prospective employers or current employers that need access to their official transcripts from institutions of higher education in the state, specifically those subject to Title 20, Chapter 3, I could get more into that, for purposes of employment can in fact get those transcripts sent over to those employers. That is regardless of that student's debt status within that institution. Such official transcripts, as you can imagine or know, are required by a range of industries, from construction and manufacturing to healthcare, other professions, particularly those that may require licensing. The bill works to ensure that those who are in debt can secure employment in order to be able to pay off that debt. That is essentially what the bill does. It's drafted rather narrowly, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions about the exact scope of it and hopefully make it a better bill, but that is a reasonably good introduction, if I do say so myself, to the bill.
Thank you. And you got right to the point. We appreciate that. I would ask, do we have any specific questions? Again, we'll take a debate or policy-oriented questions, after we complete hearing from the public. Do we have any specific questions of the gentleman on to clarify the language? Representative Park, Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lim, I think this is an excellent bill that's very straightforward. One question that does come to mind is there any other way in which institutions of higher education can collect a debt, and kind of how widespread is this practice in which they're unwilling to issue transcripts because students may have some outstanding debt? Right.
So with respect to I hear at least two questions in there. With respect to the second question, i.e. how widespread is this practice, I've seen estimates of upwards of about 180,000 students within Georgia affected by this practice. I will be clear, this bill certainly does not address all 180,000 of those. It does not address all institutions of higher education. And again, it's limited as it's currently written to if a prospective or current employer would need that transcript. But the broad number is around 180K. And with respect to the first question, which I believe was, are there other ways that they can collect this debt? Do you mean besides payment of the debt?
Besides holding hostage their transcripts?
Well, I think so. I think hopefully all of us would be able to agree that, we want students, again, to be able to pay off that debt. And if there are there are certainly many instances, I mean, I personally went through, not the transcript issue per se, but I think those of us that have been through any level of, well, getting financial aid from federal government and other institutions, think about payment plans or other means of really coming up with a way that is amenable to both parties, i.e. the institution and the student, of paying off that debt in a reasonably timely manner. So again, this bill is to ensure that with that narrow but significant problem of ensuring that people can access that employment, sometimes quite well-paying employment, but it doesn't matter whether it's well-paying or not. I think we would have an interest in ensuring that anyone that has secured employment, with the employer needing that transcript in order to make that official, would enable that student to pay off that particular debt.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, again, I think it's a very common sense, reasonable bill that would certainly help us with workforce development issues that we're facing right now. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, everyone.
I appreciate the whip there. Remember, we're going to get into your thoughts when we debate the bill, Mr. Whip. Mr. Whip, you're supposed to turn and smile. I was just kidding a bit. I was kidding a bit with you there. Just kidding. Dr. Clark.
Just really quickly, you referenced Title 20 -3 of the code. Which article, or is this something that applies all across that title of the law?
Yes, so I should know the article. It is, but I do know with respect to that chapter 3 of Title 20, because it's specific to the chapter, not the article.
Yeah.
That would be University System of Georgia. I believe Georgia Military College is in there, as well as certain, not all, but certain private institutions to the extent that they are governed by the Georgia Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission. That is my understanding, as well as from alleged counsel.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Representative, the chairman shared that I think we are going to get some data, but I guess first blush, you've made reference to 100, was it 80?
180
I'd be
K,
curious,
180,000.
students, is that correct?
That's correct.
In the system, I'd love to see those numbers and where they come from. But it also worries me, we got 180,000 folks that graduated from or attended our universities and are not in a situation with a degree to go out and look at gainful employment that would allow them to amortize that debt. So I do have a question and that, a concern there. Why do we have that many folks? They're trying to look for a job with a degree, and so I look forward to seeing that information. Thank you.
May I respond to that? Okay.
Don't mind if you don't mind. We need to move. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had a question or two, if you'll indulge me. I guess when we're talking about the debt here, are we talking about tuition that's owed? That is in arrears to the university or the institution, or are we largely talking about different types of fees that have been charged to the student?
It's, for the most part, it's the former, i.e. a tuition, by the data that is certainly making up the chunk of debt, but it does include other forms of fees in which, or other payments in which the student may be in arrears.
And I guess when you reference debt, practically are the institutions withholding transcripts if an individual just has debt or if they're delinquent in their debt? Because those are two very different things.
Yes, so that's a great question. With respect to this bill, it doesn't specifically state if whether they're delinquent or not. It specifically states if the transcript is being withheld because the student owes debt. Now, to be clear, in most, if not all instances, I don't have the data on this, but in most and not all instances, it's because they are delinquent in that debt. But this bill as written specifically goes to whether debt, whether delinquent or not, is being used to withhold the transcript. So it's going to the act of withholding because of debt, not narrowing it to delinquency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We're going to go to some speakers on it, and then we'll call you back up. We'll get an opportunity to finish.
Thank you.
Can somebody get the list? There's nobody on the list. Does anybody wish to speak to this? I know I had mentioned to the system and the technical system. Mr. Chancellor, do you or anyone on the staff, could you offer us some impact? I don't want to put you on the spot. We're glad to have you here as our guest today, but is there anyone that, we don't have to do it today, but if you have information available for the committee, we'd love to hear from.
Mr. Chairman, you had 4 specific questions, and we've got those answers for you to deliver to you. I thought today this was just a hearing, and when the committee discusses the bill, we'll be prepared to talk about the consequences to the university system. Okay,
so we'll hold that for the time being. Thank you. There you go. So anyone else that wishes to speak to this afternoon? Technical college, you're going to hold that on that. Okay. Then if there are no further questions, I'd actually ask Chairman Perkle to wait on a question. Representative Levin, we're going to invite you back up. If you would entertain one additional question from Chairman Perkle, and then we'll give you time to close off. I've got a question for you just on the content, and then
Sure.
we'll move on. Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in relation to Representative Kelly's question regarding, debt. So if it's tuition and fees, it's one thing. I had an opportunity to, upon graduation, help the public service department at the school that I attended with maybe some traffic citations that. Parking tickets, so I had several. So is there any way that we can know how much? What's the average? Is it, $25? Is it a, $35 parking ticket? And secondly, that it is somewhat related. So as a parent of 3 kids, we had to battle at the supper table many times. You will not have dessert until you eat your vegetables. And the kids would say, well, I want the dessert first. And you say, well, you can have it when you eat your veggies. And while I love vegetables and I think they're good for you, the kids didn't think that way as much. To me, it's a vast oversimplification, and I'm sure. But if we have a fine and we say, listen, I need you to pay this parking ticket or whatever it is there a negative consequence like there was for my children? I had plenty of negative consequences if they didn't. Is this a negative consequence that we're taking away from our member institutions is kind of what I wanted to say.
Yes. So with respect to the former question, which I take to understand, is there a way to quantify the average? And I take the point, again, to Representative Kelly's point, a debt here is not, and as we all know, debt can mean many things other than tuition. So I would certainly support the proposition that you're putting forward, getting really those numbers. And with respect to the second, or kind of bridging the two, to the extent that it's regardless of the number, and this is really dependent on the institution, regardless of the number at which there may or may not be a threshold at which the institution withholds that debt. With respect to your second question, that's why the bill is narrowly drawn, because I hear what you're saying very much, and I believe that there has to be a balance. But in this instance, I'm trying to address the chicken and egg problem of, well, someone has debt, but they have secured, or there's a prospective employer which proves that the student is trying to go out there and getting employment in order to be paying off that debt. But if they are hamstrung from actually getting that employment in order to earn the income, in order to be paying off that debt. That's the specific type of the issue that's trying to be addressed here. Yes, the bill could be drawn more broadly. We can have philosophical or very practical debates about what that does. But in this instance, it's addressing that chicken and egg problem of a student already trying to get employment, or in fact, in many cases, having already secured employment. So I understand the concern about the negative incentive, but with this population, these are folks that are legitimately trying to pay off that debt.
Okay, all right, I have two more lights here. Again, if these are questions of the author without us, debating the bill, we don't have that, but I'm going to call on you and just ask you to keep it to a question. If we get the bill back for us for action, then we'll go forward. Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again. So my question has a little bit to do with where the debts normally come from. So if I'm a student that took out a student loan from the government, then and not directly from the school, my transcripts are not going to be withheld because the government still got theirs. The school got theirs. The government just didn't. And so I can carry all types of student loan debt and still have my official transcript and get that job. But if I'm a self-pay student, so I decided I'm going to try to just pay for school on my own, I'm going to pay the school directly, and for whatever, maybe I fell on hard times, or maybe I didn't get the job I thought I was going to get, I can't get my official transcript. So it's not that people who hold debt aren't getting transcripts, it's that people who hold a specific type of debt aren't getting access to their transcripts. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's my understanding of the general practice as well, that it is really falling upon, generally speaking, that certain class of folks that you mentioned, Representative Clark, which is self-pay folks, those that are in direct debt, or in which, rather, the institution themselves have not been paid. There may be other instances, sure, let's leave the room for that possibility, but that is my understanding as well of the general population being affected.
Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Carpenter.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a question out of this, but first of all, thank you for bringing the bill. I signed it. Obviously, I believe in solutions, and I think this provides a pathway for people to pay back their debts because, like you stated earlier, this is about. So I'm getting there. Bear with me. I'm following the Chuck Martin train to question. Give me just a minute. Bear with me, Daddy. But right, so literally you're providing a pathway for these people to be able to pay the debt back. It's narrowly tailored. Is that not correct? That you would be seeking employment, and most jobs that would require these transcripts are probably higher paying jobs. So thus enabling the person to pay that debt in a more rapid fashion.
Yes.
And is it not further true that it's probably the question of why are our institutions in the lending business in the first place, and how does this debt even happen if we really want to be frustrated with the whole system and trying to figure out how to solve it? Why are they being banks, and what's causing that financial transaction where – because I always remembered if I didn't pay if the tuition wasn't paid, I didn't get to go to class. So I don't know how we got into that situation, and that would be a question obviously for another day.
And that's when we're going to address it on another day. Number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had another thought as we've gone through this. Representative Lim, do you have about an average dollar amount that these 180,000 people, the average dollar amount that they are, of the debt that they owe?
No, I could not find that. Excuse me, let me phrase. While I found reputable sources with respect to the 180K, I have not yet found the average amount with respect to the debt, but that may be because, as per your question, there are different types of debt, and with respect to the narrower problem that I'm trying to address, I think that's where my head has been, but I don't have that number in front of me now.
And I've just kind of been trying to think through the same things I think Representative Clark, Representative Carpenter hit on is, I know when I went to, a public university here for law school, I took out a student loan, and through the federal government, the only place I knew you could get a actual student loan was through there. And so I was just trying to figure out how this debt, if it's for tuition or whether it's for other fees or, like I said, parking tickets or others. So look forward to being educated more on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's what we'll follow up. We'll follow up with the TCSU. So I want to wind us up. Well, let me let you. Do you have anything you want to close out with us here today?
Thank you to Chairman Carpenter for co-sponsoring the bill, since I didn't get a chance to respond to him. But I will respond to the.
Well, I mean, and let me be clear about that. I mean, I think he said for another day. I mean, he's asking you a question. We need to get the information
Yes.
from the technical college system and the university system. It's not. He raises a good question. The reason I said it was for another day was, you know, in a serious form
Yeah.
of that was it was to have people that could, you know, adequately answer it. That's not
And,
your,
and that
your
was
realm.
that was the part I wanted to respond to, because to be absolutely clear, there are many different combinations and permutations of this bill. This is a type of legislation that I believe has only it's in a few states. It's not widespread, but I think as more and more the workforce problem comes to bear in America, this is something more and more folks are considering. But as I mentioned, there's different combinations and permutations. What is the money we've heard here? What type of debt are we looking at? This bill, as it's related to that one chicken and egg problem, how many people are impacted? So I too look forward to really more precise figures as well.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing it, and let me, as a guidance, just from the chair's perspective, and awaiting information from TCSG and USG, is to offer you this, is I don't think and would hope we are not holding somebody's ability to get a job over a $10 parking ticket. I would hope, and we'll find out if we are, and we'll look at for ways around that. But I also know that the way it's written, and I don't know how one would incur a 4-digit debt, you know, in the last semester of college, if you are able to pay for your meal plan or your dorm room as you go, or if you could if you happen to write a bad check to the university for this. I don't know that, but the way it's written now, there is no cap of amount. It could be, you could have entered into that debt in somewhat of a fraudulent manner. And again, that's a one-off, but you could have done that in a bit of telling one story and doing another. And the way the bill's written, they would get the same advantage of getting their transcript, and the university or the technical school is never going to see them again, you know, once they, I mean, that's their collateral. I mean, Dr. Clark mentioned when you enter into a loan agreement, is my understanding, when you enter there's a promissory note that says, I promise to pay this, and this is what you either have a guaranteed, you know, loan with some sort of collateral, or they do it on a signature. They can attach you. There's nothing else the universities can do. So I would, you know, advise to get the devil, if you will, is in the details here. So we'll do
Right.
that, and we'll continue to work work with you on that.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing the item. We're going to move on in the agenda this afternoon, and we're going to go to President Riley. And let her tell us about Georgia Student Finance. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And for the record on that, any speaker that wishes to sit at the table rather than stand at the podium is welcome to do that. I know the president is getting around on a walking boot, so we appreciate you being here. No, I got you. No, I got you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
We have you, maybe let's turn you up a little bit. Can we hear you?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for inviting me to present today and give you a bit of an overview of the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I'll start off with showing that we actually are a three-legged stool at Georgia Student Finance. Most folks think of us as merely the commission, but we actually administer the Georgia Student Finance Authority and the Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these entities that make up our entire agency's workforce. Again, our agency structure is these three entities. They work together to provide integrated student financial aid services. The staff that are under our jurisdiction work on all three entities. We are not specific to any single one entity. And we share common board members, but we have three separate boards, and they share our mission and vision, and our executive leadership oversees all three of these entities. Our board consists of 14 members who are appointed by the governor and representing the 14 congressional districts in the state of Georgia. And our boards provide governance and oversight for all of the administrative functions that we carry out. The programs that are administered by the Commission are listed on this next slide, and as you can see, the Commission primarily oversees our HOPE programs, of which we have a great variety, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of them in a few moments. And the Commission also administers the dual enrollment program. The HOPE programs, as you can see, are funded by lottery dollars and dual enrollment by state funds. The programs administered by the authority, there is quite an extensive list. These are programs, the first two, Student Access Loans and the Georgia College Completion Grant, are funded by lottery dollars, and the remainder on this list, and you can see quite an extensive list, are funded by state appropriations. On our next slide, the program that is administered by the corporation actually no longer exists. The Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation was created as a public corporation in 1965 by the General Assembly, and we refer to it as GHEC. It served at the time, up until 2012, as a guarantor for Federal Family Education Loan Program, commonly referred to in federal higher education world as FELP. The corporation paid claims for FELP loans and assisted students and lenders in administering that, and for that there was compensation provided to the corporation. In the late 2000s, the federal government suspended the FELP program, and in 2013, the Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation sold the portfolio that we had at that time to the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency under a 10-year revenue sharing agreement. Pennsylvania Higher Education Agency administered those loans that we sold to them, the principal balances, and they split the proceeds of the interest earnings and other collections amounts with the Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation. That contract expired in 2022. We no longer collect on those loans, so effectively the state of Georgia no longer has any action in federal higher education financing or lending. So the purpose of the corporation that was created in 1965 no longer exists. However, because it is a public corporation, there is significant accounting, auditing, administration, licensing, et cetera, that is required of the corporation to continue to comply with all state law. So we are pursuing legislation this session that hopefully will be before this committee in the weeks to come that would dissolve that corporation statutorily and allow for us to reduce our footprint, create less work effort, and no longer have to do redundant efforts for a program that no longer exists and there is no longer a purpose. When I met members and presented at the biennial in December, we had some great statistics that I just want to highlight again as we move forward. The HOPE program, as you may all know, is celebrating its 30th year this year. It was created in 1993, following the 1992 referendum. And in 1993, the first HOPE Awards were issued in the fall semester of 1993, and $21 million went out for that fiscal year. Over 2.1 million students have benefited from HOPE programs since the inception, so over 30 years, well over 2 million students have benefited from the program. 81 institutions in the state of Georgia, public, technical college, and private, participate in our HOPE programs, and we are excited that the University System of Georgia, Technical College System, and the private system, many of the private colleges that Ms. Jenna Colvin mentioned earlier, are HOPE participants. On our next slide, you'll see the fiscal impact. From 1993 to 2022, over $13.7 billion in HOPE awards have been provided to students to achieve their higher education goals. We're excitedly watching this current semester that our students are enrolled in, and we believe that before the semester closes, we will cross the $14 billion amount in awards given out to students. Again, 30 years of incredible impact for the students in the state of Georgia. On our next slide, just some detail on how the money that we are appropriated is distributed out for student benefit. You can see that the lion's share, about 86% of the funds that we disperse each year, is for our HOPE programs, but we, as has been mentioned earlier by Jenna Colvin, also provide tuition equalization grants, student access loans, dual enrollment funds, military programs, as you saw under the authorities program detail, and also other programs such as our REACH Georgia program. This slide illustrates the investment in HOPE programs, and you can see how much it has grown over time. As you can see, the blue portion of the bars for each year from 1993 to 2022 represents HOPE scholarship awards at public institutions. And after 2012, the yellow portion of the bar represents the Zell Miller scholarships that were awarded at public institutions. You also can see in green the HOPE Scholarship private, and you can see the key going forward at the bottom of the screen. What I would draw your attention to, that you can see that there was a significant amount of HOPE grant utilization, and that was during the Great Recession period, a great run-up of folks during the recession that chose to pursue technical education and utilized our HOPE grant program. And you can also see in this graph the impact, the changes that occurred during the Great Recession when the General Assembly made modifications to the HOPE program to ensure that there were sufficient funds to sustain the program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. This slide is a representation of lottery dollars that have been used since 2007 to fund pre-K and HOPE programs. I share this with you again to speak to what happened during our Great Recession when the revenues that were paid over to the Department of Early Care and Learning and the Student Finance Commission were not sufficient to cover the expenses that were incurred in those years, resulting in the use of reserve funds that were held by Treasury. So to illustrate, the expenses exceeded revenues, and we were upside down on having a balanced budget each fiscal year, resulting in having to use reserves. The work done by the General Assembly at that time modified the award amounts and also created the Zell Miller Scholarship. And as you can see, after the changes in the legislation, the income or revenues that were appropriated to the lottery, from the lottery to Student Finance Commission and to the Department of Early Care and Learning tracked much more closely with the expenses occurred over time. You can see that there was a bit of an uptick in 2021, and that was primarily attributed to some successful performance of the lottery during the pandemic, where the online utilization of the lottery programs resulted in significantly more dollars being available for the benefit of these programs. This next slide is just a representation of our budgets from amended year fiscal 2021 through the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2024. And I just would draw your attention to the total funds at the bottom of each of these columns, where in 2021, our total budget was just over $1 billion, and our projected or proposed budget for FY 2024 is over $1.2 billion, about $175 million growth in our budget in the past 4 years. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the impacts of the governor's recommendation with the funding for HOPE programs to increase the award factor rate in FY 2024. Members of the committee who have been on the committee in past years may remember that in 2023 there was a conversation about adjusting the tuition factor rate. This slide illustrates the percent of tuition that the HOPE Award paid in FY 2022. And before the committee last year, there was discussion about how many of the institutions that are illustrated in this slide by the red bar were less than 90% covering tuition at the institutions to which the students were attending. In FY 2023, the General Assembly made, as seen on our next slide, raised the factor rate to at least 90% of the prior year's tuition. And so those students that are enrolled in institutions that, in the public institutions, both at USG and the technical systems, are receiving at least 90% of the tuition amount as a HOPE award in this current academic year. As indicated in the governor's proposed budget for FY 2024, funding is being provided to Student Finance Commission to raise the HOPE factor rate to 100% of prior year's tuition amounts. And as a reminder, HOPE awards are calculated by applying the HOPE factor rate to an institution's prior year tuition, while in contrast, the Zell Miller Scholarship award is 100% of the institution's current year tuition amount. So as you can see, the yellow on this slide would represent the funding being provided in the governor's budget to bring all of the proposed tuition rates for FY 2024 as 100% of the prior year's tuition amount.
President
Mr.
Raleigh,
Chairman.
if you will allow me, I just want, that's sometimes, even sitting in this chair for 4 years and prior to that, it's sometimes hard for us to get an understanding of. To be clear, the governor sets each year the rate at which, this year he was set at 100% of prior year's tuition.
That is correct.
It has been floating in the past, and it got kind of off kilter depending upon whom you would like to believe or speak to, how they got disjointed before the rate last year that went to 90, somewhere down in 74. I think TCSG was down in the 80s, maybe 78. It was lower, but they got a bit disjointed because of the way it was applied on varying tuition increases. But remember, the governor set the number at 100% this year of prior year tuition. Should the governor set it again next year at 100% of prior tuition, but an institution have a tuition increase, you would see that chart change, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. If a tuition adjustment is made for an upcoming academic year, the HOPE award will be based on 100% of the prior year tuition. So there could be a gap in the amount a student would receive dependent on a tuition increase going forward. Whereas, in contrast, a Zell Miller Scholarship award would remain at 100% of the tuition coverage.
I just think that's important to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next slide indicates the potential number of students that would benefit from the factor rate being raised to 100%. Our calculations project somewhere in the vicinity of 128,000 students would benefit from the factor rate being set at 100%. The top bar shows all TCSG institutions combined, and that includes grant and scholarship students. And the count that we project for TCSG institutions is about 31,000, and the remainder would be at the USG institutions. Kennesaw State University would likely have the most students affected at over 18,000, followed by Georgia State, which would be close to 15,000. And you can see that representation on this bar graph. Our next slide represents the dollar impact for a full-time student in FY 2024 based on the rates of tuition that we know of today. All HOPE students would receive additional lottery dollars based on the prior year tuition rate, and the impact will depend on the tuition rate at the institution on how many semester hours the student takes. But you can see that the increases range from $509 for a student enrolled at the Georgia Institute of Technology to $90 for students that are attending at state colleges where the delta is much smaller between where the gaps would be from where they currently are, at least 90%, all the way to 100%. My final slide is just to promote our flagship website, georgiafutures.org. We highly recommend all ninth grade students and above register with us at Georgia Futures. We have unique student dashboards for every student who is enrolled in a high school in the state of Georgia, and we can communicate to them and help them on their journey to selecting an institution for which they wish to enroll, and helping them model on how they would afford to attend an institution that they wish to enroll. We look forward to working with students across the state. We have an outreach team that is on the ground every day. We have a 24/7 virtual assistant on our website, but this is our go-to tool and resource for Georgia students that can look, model, explore potential careers that they would like to pursue, and then work with our professionals at Georgia Student Finance Commission to ensure that they can put together the right financial aid package to ensure their higher education success. And Mr. Chairman, I again thank you for the time being with you here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, President Riley. You do have a couple of questions. I'll start with Representative Burnell. Number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all of that valuable information. I just have one question related to HOPE. HOPE will be fully funded this year. That's what is proposed, and whether is that possible even with the decline of student enrollment?
Thank you for your question, Representative. The funds that the governor has proposed in the budget will cover the students that we anticipate will be enrolling in subsequent, in the FY 2024 academic year. We don't believe that there would be any issue with that, and as we've mentioned previously, we do monitor the enrollment rates. We work very closely with the USG, the TCSG, and our privates, any of the 81 institutions, to ensure we are careful on understanding how many students are enrolled and how many may be eligible for the programs that we administer. Thank you.
Further questions? Committee have questions? I do. You had a late arrival. Representative Glaze.
Thank you so much for that wonderful representation of what we need to do to get our kids into college. But I want to make sure that parents are also the primary focus in getting Georgia Futures into their hands and accessing, so that they are really able to help our students make the best choices. How are we now making sure that our counselors are getting that information and making sure that our parents have access?
Thank you very much for that question. Not only do students have the ability to create accounts in Georgia Futures, parents can do the same thing. And we do work very closely with our high school counselors across the state to ensure that they're aware that they have the ability to interact with us directly, whether it's online or whether one of our outreach professionals will assist them individually to help them with any questions they might have and any navigation issues they might have, and ensuring that they have all the right information to make very good choices.
Thank you for the question. I want to echo that we have counselors that can do that. I think we're 1 to 400 students now. There's some, but even if we double that, it would be a lot of people to do that. And I think we have to find alternate ways to drive folks to the information, and we're working on some of that may be technically making use of social media, et cetera. So we'll get back with you, and we'll have that soon. Representative Jackson, Edna Jackson.
Thank you. I'm going to be very short. I'm concerned. I know that you're saying that the counselors, the teachers, the students are working. I worked in financial aid at Savannah State University, and I know that in rush hours that parents are not there until registration time, and they find out their child doesn't have enough money. They may have to get the Parent Plus loan with it, and they may not qualify, which increases the amount of money that the student has to take on. I'm a little concerned because a lot of these students will go in and then they don't graduate for lack of funding coming, not because they have lost the hope and for other reasons. I just don't know, and it's nothing to do with this. And Mr. Chairman, I wish that we could address this later because I know we have so much on the agenda. But I am really concerned because there are so many young people that are out there. They went to college, they had to drop out because of finances. Then they have to find a job, and that loan is sitting up there with them. What can we do to help people like that? The Hope started out with public education only at first. Mm-hmm. And now we have, and I have no problems with private schools coming in and be a part of it. But I suggest that I think we're missing the point of how we can help some of these young people that need to stay in, and they get wild for the first semester and not realizing the impact that it has on them. So they never get a chance to finish.
I thank you for that question, Representative. And the Student Finance Commission assists students while they are in their post-secondary careers as well. We serve to assist them on any additional financial aid that we may offer, or try to help them find alternate sources if they've utilized all that we have. But our outreach team, as well as the technology where we can push information to students who have an account with us and help them model what their best financial aid package might be.
Thank you. And President Riley, due to the hour, I think there are people at other meetings. We may not get into this, but while you're seated there, the last item we had on the agenda was for a brief discussion about 1435. I think we call that the completion grant. I don't know if the bill had a name, but it's being referred to as a completion grant. We'll have, and in fact, there is drafted a copy of that. We thought we, had everything the way we wanted it, that 80%. And we've come to realize that, especially at TCSG, they tend to plan annually, and many of the programs are 2-year programs. So if you go in semesters 25, 50, 75, I'm finished, you don't get to 80 before the last semester. So I'm going to bring to you a suggestion that for 2-year programs, you're eligible for that completion grant at I think 47% of your degree. That you've basically making adequate progress, and then on the 4-year degree size, I think President Riley, weren't we at 70?
Mr. Chairman, you did
70 for that,
70%.
and then we may ask the committee. And I'm kind of going over to the next agenda item while we've got the president seated there, but we may also ask the committee to endorse and get appropriations to move from the SAL loan program funds to the grant program, because I believe you want to sound for the committee that the repayment rate on SAL is not very good. So if folks need it, we can direct it toward the need. There tends to be a place where people are taking it out and not finishing and just doing what the representative from Savannah said, running up a debt that puts them further behind. So.
And thank you for allowing me to provide a little bit of context on the Student Access Loan. The Student Access Loan Program was created at the time the Hope Scholarship Program was modified to provide students that might have a gap in their funding pursuant to the changes in the Hope Award rates at the time. Over time, it has grown to be eligible for 2 students who their institution indicates that they have some financial aid need. We have right now a current portfolio of just a little of active loans of just a little under $200 million in loans. Of that, about $94 million is currently in repayment status, and of that $94 million, 27% is delinquent. We have written off loans already as bad debt of 68 million since we began this program back in 2012. And currently we have 13 post-secondary institutions that have been disqualified from offering student access loans to their students because of the high default rate. So there is evidence that the utilization of this student access loan may not be resulting in the way that it was originally envisioned.
So we would look at and to try to repurpose that capital to be more advantageous to the student and more degree or certificate oriented to get a completion. Is that fair enough? Well, President Riley, thank you for your presentation. I don't see any more questions. I have one more for the good of the order, if I may. We'll meet next Wednesday. We'll have additional bills. Y'all know if I've got something to say, I say it, and I try to give everybody their opportunity. And we're going to have a bill later on this session that we'll hear. We heard something similar to it a few years ago. It's introduced by Chairman Carpenter. He called the Workforce Development Act this year, but it's basically for workforce tuition. We've heard this before. There's certainly, that's a policy issue before this committee that one can agree on. That went in, Chairman Carpenter, yesterday. No sooner than today, an email went out, and I want to identify the individual, but the last part of that email says, and different parties can agree to disagree, or we can debate the policy. But the last portion of that email says, HB 131, the gentleman's proposition, I'm quoting this from the email, puts illegals in front of Americans and legal immigrants. Again, we'll debate that policy before this committee. You may be for it, you may be against it, you may not know yet. But I want to read two places in the bill. I'll just read one. It's duplicated for TCSG and USG. To be clear, nothing in this code section shall be construed to require in-state tuition classification for individuals that are not lawfully present in Georgia. Above that in the bill, it says, an eligible program at the technical college system shall give priority consideration to enrollment applications by qualified students who are classified for in-state tuition over applications by qualified opportunity students, which is dealt with in this bill, and may defer enrollment for qualified opportunity students until all applications for students that have in-state tuition are accepted, deferred, or rejected. We'll debate the policy as it happens, but I think there's nothing more important than connection and communication. So I just want to communicate to anybody that's listening and anybody that's out there, and you're welcome to take it of me. Black letter, words on paper. This does not put people that are in the country illegally in front of others. That's not up for debate. And whether you take a position for this bill or against this bill, I think it's important to know and just be direct and upfront what it does and doesn't do in the language. And with that, I have nothing more for today. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything else? If not, thank everybody for their time and attention today. If there's no objection, we'll stand adjourned. Without objection, we are adjourned. Did you say we were going to meet next Wednesday? Yes, ma'am.